off to start the next trip. It's 9 o'clock. Carl and Jarrod text me at 2 a.m. saying they'll make a plan when I get there, but I don't think they're going to be awake yet. So let's set the scene a little here. It's a Sunday of Melbourne Cup weekend. The Cup is run on a Tuesday, and it's a public holiday for most Victorians, which means that 90% of the state also take the Monday off and have a 4-day weekend. It'll be my first trip on the new bike, the Kawasaki Versys 650, which for me, coming from the 390 Duke, feels like I have a hell of a lot more speed and power. It's a 2014 650L model, which has limited power to make it Lambs approved, not just Wild Lambs approved. Wild Lambs all took a trip to Adelaide to help pick it up, where, at 3 a.m, we found out something called a 24-hour bakery existed.
What a time to be alive.
Before being a little worse for wear when we picked it up the next day. So, with only 3 days left in the long weekend, and absolutely no part of the plan having been formed the night before,
I am shocked! Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
We decided to head north to try and avoid the massive rain band that'd be coming in from the west. Sometime around 11, Carl, Jarrod and myself headed off, figuring we would head the 200 or so k's to Swan Hill and take our time and see some of the very sparse sights along the way. Our last bike trip had been in January, and it was now the start of November, so it was just an immediate sense of freedom, like one of those barn animals being let outside after being locked up all winter. First stop would be the town of Warragnabeal. Sitting on the edge of the Yarriambiack Creek, a creek that splits off from the Wimmera River some 50 kilometres south, it was built on sheep and grain farms in the 1800s, and not much has changed since then. So, stopping in at the servo to get some fuel and some lunch, and can I just say how nice it is with the new bike having a range over 400 kilometres, unlike the old one that would only make less than 250 on a full tank. Though Jarrod still only gets that far, so it only makes me feel better and doesn't affect how often we stop on our trips. But we mapped out some sights to see along our way to Swan Hill and set off. First stop, Birchip and their anatomically correct bull statue.
It's a boy, and what a boy!
Next stop was a nice lake just down the road a few minutes, where we had a little rest and loosened up the old aging meat machines, before heading to our next point of interest, visiting purely because we are 12 years old. That's right, the town of Chittybong, that is little more than one farmhouse. With no more attractions or distractions to see along the way, we headed the last 50 k's into Swan Hill, with the landscape looking drier and drier before the little strip of greenery the Murray River provides. We finished up at our motel about 4 o'clock, before freshening up and heading down the street for the usual pub meal. After a delicious meal at the commercial hotel, we figured we should take a walk over to New South Wales and reward ourselves with a drink at the pub on the other side, before heading back to the motel and calling it a day. It's wet. Day 2, we woke to a wet, misty morning that didn't bode well for what the rest of the day would bring. But we sucked it up and took a 10-second ride to then stop at our first tourist attraction of the day. A giant 11-metre long Murray cod that was made as a movie prop that the locals liked so much they kept it. Smile, say cheese. It's a video. Next item on the list was breakfast, and a fresh, nutritious, balanced breakfast is essential for a healthy mind and soul. By the time we left Swan Hill, it was 11:30, but luckily sometime between the 3rd and 7th drink last night, we decided we'd head to Mildura today. If the weather was bad, we could smash it there, or take our time if we weren't getting rained on. It's only a 2.5 hour ride following along the side of the river for most of the way, and it shows the stark contrast between the small drought-resistant bushes and trees to the green, vibrant vegetables and fruit trees that wouldn't survive here without the artificial irrigation. But as we rode through alternating scenes of bushland scrub and industrial fruit farms, having a stop here or there, we got our first downpour of the trip. Like a teenager's first time, it came in hard, lasted only 2 minutes, and made us think maybe we should have just stayed home instead. With the downpour over, we continued our way northwest to Mildura, passing more scrub, then more manicured landscapes, then another downpour or two, before we stopped in Robinvale to grab a bite to eat and let Jarrod fill up at the servo. We crossed over the river here and cut inland for a little bit, rather than following the river's meandering path south and back up north again, and we'd cross back into Victoria again when we got to Mildura.
Look, boy. Now I'm in New South Wales. Now I'm in Victoria. New South Wales. Victoria. New South Wales. Victoria. New South Wales. Victoria. New South Wales. Victoria.
Oh!
Victoria.
We don't tolerate that kind of crap, sir!
We managed the hour's ride to Mildura without getting wet, despite the large dark clouds on the horizon, and stopped for a quick refreshment at the Mildura Working Man's Club, former world record holder for the longest bar at 91 metres long. We then took a quick tour of the riverside before pulling into our motel mere seconds before another downpour. Tea was some overpriced slop from Hog's Breath Cafe.
Let's see now. What do you folks have here, huh? A crusty burger. That doesn't sound too appetizing.
A couple of refreshments back in the motel room, and some time trying to use the TV remote to play video games, and that was the end of day 2. No rain this morning, but we weren't naive enough to think it wouldn't rain later on. Quick stop at Macca's for breakfast, and a slight stretching of the term fast food, but 45 minutes later we're on our way home. We left the nice green manicured lawns of Mildura and headed almost straight south. It's a 300-kilometre trip back home. It would take us about 4 hours with all our stops. It wasn't far outside Mildura and away from the mighty Murray But the palm trees and grapevines disappeared, and the bushland scrub dominated the landscape again. About half an hour later, we found ourselves in our first rain shower of the day, which wasn't so bad because we'd just overtaken some sort of liquid fertiliser truck that we'd been stuck behind for the past 10 minutes, and the rain washed some of the smell away. If there's one downside to owning a motorbike, it's some of the smells, whether it's roadkill or diesel fumes. There's no recirculate option on the helmet. First stop was Oyen for Jarrod's second fill-up of the day, and things were looking wetter the further south we went. "30 seconds later, we were once again caught in the rain, but this wasn't just a 2-minute downpour, but a steady rain was stuck in for the next 20 minutes. But we were dry by the time we went through the little towns of Tempe and Speed.
I saw this in a movie about a bus that had to speed around the city, keeping its speed over 50. And if its speed dropped, it would explode. I think it was called The Bus That Couldn't Slow Down.
Next little town was Lascelles, and past the 120-year-old pub that had just burnt down 3 weeks before. A quick stop in Hopeton, and a bloke stopped to ask if we were going south, because it was pissing down that direction. He laughed when we said yes, and that's how the rest of the trip went. With it raining when we left Hopeton, through Rainbow and Japarrett where I left Jarrod and Carl, and all the way back to Nil. Despite the weather, we still had a great time, and the new bike passed all the tests to take it on a much longer adventure. Stay tuned for that one.